Let's just roll with it here. All right. So this is the January 8th, 2026 Crossplane community meeting. As always, let me go ahead and drop a link to the doc into the Zoom chat. So if folks miss the agenda doc, they can find it now. And come on in there, and agenda is open. So if folks have topics they want to add, please do add it as a suggestion, and we will definitely get to it. And then also, if you want to, go ahead and add yourself as an attendee here to the meeting as well. And let's get started. So holidays are over. I think folks are slowly coming back online and getting back to it here. So hopefully everybody had good holidays. Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome back. We are working towards the 2.2 milestone right now, and that has been scheduled the entire time for early February of this month, or sorry, this year. So we have about 1 month left in the milestone there. I don't know the exact day yet. We'll get that locked in soon though. Yeah, I think things are, I don't see any big blockers for that release just yet. We have some things that obviously aren't merged, but I don't see any big blockers there. So we talked through last community meeting in terms of like what are some of the higher level things we're working on. We'll be talking specifically about DevX related stuff and SIG CLI later on. Adam will give us an update on that in the agenda, so we'll skip that for now. One of the things that I was particularly excited about in the 2.2 milestone, and we'll need Christopher Haar to get back from his holidays and vacation time to kind of give us an update on that, is this whole idea about having customizable metrics for Crossplane to do basically whatever you want with them and get any sort of metrics out of the entire Crossplane object model. So I think there's a lot of excitement about this. There was pretty decent alignment on some of the design for this as well. But I don't know right now of what all would be implemented or included in a 2.2 timeframe. It's not specifically tied to 2.2 because I think it would be a separate project like in Crossplane Contrib. So it's not specifically tied to the release there, but it would be nice to have something, along the same milestone timeline as 2.2 because it's something that people are pretty excited about. So we will get an update from Chris on that. I know he's been working on it, and I know one of the challenges was what do we want to do with like upstream kubestate metrics and other efforts going on in upstream Kubernetes versus what do we want to do ourselves, and kind of the trade-off there between collaborating with upstream and then like speed as well too, velocity of shipping something. So we'll try to make the right decision there, and we'll get an update for folks. We'll talk about a couple other things later in the agenda as well here. So I think like maybe the big thing to call out is for 2.2, any PRs that are open or issues that folks are working on that need reviews, need support, do feel free to reach out, and so we can get the right attention from maintainers on the things that people care about for shipping in 2.2. Because I know there's plenty of PRs that are open, and we want to get the right things in. So do feel free to reach out for kind of push along anything or add another vote on things that folks want to see. All right. Yeah, so I think we'll meet again before the release happens, if I do the math right. But either way, the 2.2 release should be right around the next time that we all meet together. Okay, anything that folks want to add on 2.2 topics or issues of concern or anything like that? There's a lot on the board. Geez. Yeah, as I said, there's a lot of things out for review right now. All right. Let's move on to the ecosystem section then. And I want to save lots of time at the end here because we've got two separate demos, two separate people presenting today. So that's most important content today. I'm going to make sure we leave time for that. Erhan and Sergen added some information about the ecosystem investments here. And I think neither of them can make it, but let me just check the participants list and see if anybody's on that would rather talk about this than me. I think not. So I'll go ahead and take it then. So within Upjet and the Upjet provider generation framework, there's a big effort right now on API versionings and lifecycle management stuff for providers. The major upjet the hyperscaler upjet providers, they have a bunch of things in there, and upjet itself has things in there to manage conversions and handle breaking changes, etc., across different versions of the API as it evolves. But there is more investments to make there, and I think Sergen is driving most of this. And so I think any folks that are interested and have providers of their own and interested in influencing this effort here, there's kind of a couple different PRs to look at that are all linked here. One of them is like kind of the design of like, hey, what do we want to do for API versioning and lifecycle? What is the intent that we want to and the experience that we want to expose? And then there's a couple of different implementation related PRs of having more conversion functions and different, sort of framework support for provider authors to be able to, have reusable functions and helpers to be able to do conversions in between different versions more easily. And then also more tooling around detecting breaking changes in schema as well, and having better support for that. So, design PR and then two different implementation PRs. Both of those are pretty important for folks to look at and weigh in on if they are interested in provider API lifecycle management stuff. Which who isn't, right? That is pretty important, I think. And if anybody has any other, I didn't get a chance today to add, all the various provider releases and links into the section here, but folks are more than welcome to add, if you have a provider and you've got a release from one of them recently, go ahead and add it in there so that everyone can see it. Anything else on providers for folks? All right, then I'll jump back to the chat because Adam, it looks like you added something in the chat here about a particular issue. Let me see the status of this one. Let's see. Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, so hoping to include this in 2.2. I don't know of any specific work that's been done since this comment. I think this is something that's still on the radar, but I haven't seen, I don't see any linked PRs or anything since then. So yeah, Adam, I agree that it would be nice, but I haven't seen any further effort on that since that comment.
Yeah, I just thought I'd bring it up. If it's something we're hitting more now with V2, that second comment I put there kind of explained what's going on. We deleted namespace, and some resources basically get stuck in deletion because the provider config usage, I guess, is still trying to be updated.
Got it. And that's like the main scenario that causes that is like deleting the entire namespace, basically. Like
Yeah,
get rid of everything all at
exactly.
once. Got it. Bob, do you have any are you paged in on this one as well too? For like any more current thoughts on this?
I don't know about more current, but I mean, the underlying
You have the most
problem is
recent comment.
okay, but that's still 3 months ago. Um, yeah, I mean, the underlying problem is the way we're dealing with cleaning up the provider config usage. Um, you know, we don't untrack the resource explicitly. We rely on Kubernetes deletion to clean things up, which is great, except that, we kind of run into problems like this where, I think the ideal solution would be to have an untrack method called by the provider after it deletes the resource so that the thing is gone. Um, and I think that would resolve this problem as well as a couple of others. However, that's a huge amount of churn, and I don't know the right way to do it. I'm not enough of a Go expert to know what that implementation would look like. But yeah, I mean, the last comment was I was just concerned about overloading the usage resource with, you know, another implementation that would really blow up the number of usages and maybe cause users some headaches in terms of trying to find what they're looking for.
Yeah, and I think there are some UX concerns with that, like potential consolidation on usage. So yeah, I think there's still some design thinking that needs to be done there. But Adam, one thing I can definitely do is as well is bring this back to the like other maintainers, just kind of point out that there's interest in this on the community call today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I appreciate that. And for what it's worth, we hit this with the vault provider, but I don't think it really matters too much. It sounds like it could happen with any provider potentially.
Yeah, it definitely it's a general problem for sure. And Adam, have you already added a comment on this as well to kind of throw your hat in the ring?
No, I can do that. We did, if you go to the bottom, we did open an issue in the vault provider. But it
In
sounds like
Vault
this is the best
specifically?
place to have a
Yeah.
discussion. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Chris updated one there. Yeah, yeah. Please do. Just to kind of like bubble that up and have that visibility there for that you're affected by this as well. That was always helpful for sure. So yeah, please do,
Sure.
Adam.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, sweet. Let's roll into the community topics stuff. So we'll go through that quick. As always, there's some various content from around the ecosystem about Crossplane. I think there's a couple things that I missed here. So folks are, they see any other posts and blog posts and videos, etc. about Crossplane, feel free to add it to this list here. KubeCon Amsterdam is coming up faster than I expected. It's this year, at least we're in the year that KubeCon Amsterdam will be. So it's like a couple of months away, a few months away. We've got all of the like the CNCF project benefits. They're all scheduled and filled out and stuff, and we've got folks assigned to all of those that will be giving those talks. So thanks for everybody who's going to be contributing to that and up on stage talking about Crossplane, etc. Since last time, actually, there's also a chance that we applied for. We haven't gotten a response yet, but the CNCF, I think there's 10, since now we're a graduated project, there's 10 graduated projects per KubeCon that get to have videos playing on the keynote stage for about the project, like updates or demos or whatever. So we signed up for one, and we're waiting to hear back on that. So hopefully we get that, because that would be an awesome opportunity to have Crossplane like playing on the big keynote stage stuff before like every morning before the keynote start. So we're hoping, fingers are crossed, that we'll get that one, but we will see. Okay, so let's get into the rest of these topics here. So I wanted to mention for folks that with V2 and Composite Resources no longer having like built-in native support for their connection details, there was a lot of community confusion with that one, and rightfully so, because we didn't really have much information about it. So I wanted to call out to folks that since last community meeting, we've gone ahead and written a complete guide about, in a V2 world, how to do connection details. So you'll see here like a step-by-step guide and multiple languages of how to do it, like examples of what a composition looks like in different languages, etc. So, the general idea is, you can compose a secret yourself in your functions. There's one more coming here for function patch and transform, which does not have the same type of capabilities that other more general languages have. It's more restricted. And so what we're doing there is basically adding more logic into function patch and transform that kind of restores the experience that you were able to get with V1 concerning connection details specifically. So that will definitely lower the pain associated with migrating or upgrading to V2 and kind of using function patch and transform and not having connection details functionality. That should be addressed pretty well. I'm hoping to have a release of that out this week or so. And then the guide here will be updated as well of examples of what that looks like for patch and transform too. So there's information now, at least. So feel free to check out that guide if you find any issues with it. Feel free to let me know. Open an issue, open a PR to fix it. But at least the how to do connection details in V2 is we've got information and we've got details about it now. I also wanted to call out here, Adam. I think was this your PR? You have the next topic also. Yeah, how about you want to talk about this one and just roll into the 6CLI stuff too?
Sure. So this PR addresses, I think, a few kind of long-standing, uh, I would call them quality of life things around the package manager. So one of them is that the package manager didn't actually implement the spec and 100%. The X package spec says that the CRDs that are included in function packages won't be installed in the cluster. And previously that wasn't true. Crossplane did actually install those input CRDs, which meant that if you had two different functions that took the same input CRD, you couldn't install them both in a given cluster. So we fixed that. That doesn't happen anymore. There was also a bug in the function validation where you could actually install arbitrary resources as long as Crossplane was allowed to create them with a function package, because we weren't validating that only certain types were allowed. And then the third one is if you do happen to have a package that includes types that it shouldn't include, so a provider that includes compositions, for example, or a function that includes a composition. Previously, we would just totally fail and not install the package at all. So we've changed it so that it just ignores those objects. It doesn't install them, but the package will still install correctly. So kind of being a little more tolerant of malformed packages, and also allowing for the possibility that there might be some external controller running in the system that does understand those things, and is separately pulling the package and installing different things from it, or doing something with those things. So that's the three. This is merged now, so I think this should be a non-breaking change for I hope everybody. The one thing to watch out for is if you do have a function and you were relying on its input CRD being installed into the cluster, that will break. So that's the one, the one thing that could be an issue. We do know of one function that we built at Upbound that was relying on that, that we're fixing. But so it's possible there's some others out in the community. But
and Adam, do you off the top of your head, like, what is that fix? Is that like to change the function logic so that it doesn't expect the function CRD, or is it like getting it into the control plane in a different way?
Right. I think the plan is to get it into the control plane in a different way, but I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go and look. It's the AI Stratus Transformer function that we have. So that's this one. Any like questions or concerns on that one before I move on to SIG-CLI stuff? Sounds like no. So okay, good. Moving on to SIG-CLI stuff. I am starting to work on the work of moving the CLI out of the core Crossplane repo. And we kind of decided to do that as a prerequisite to building more DevX stuff into the CLI, for a couple of reasons. For one, it I think will let us move a little bit faster on the CLI side and kind of decouple our release cadence and and development cadence in general from the core of Crossplane. The CLI, I think, should be able to move a little faster given kind of where it sits in the world of software. So that's part of the reason. The other thing is it will make it easier for us to have a separate set of maintainers for the CLI. That's not impossible with them in the same repo, but it's a little clearer, I think, if we have it in a separate repository. We can have CLI specific maintainers, which is nice. So the first step toward doing that is to decouple the CLI from internal packages in Crossplane. Currently, it does import a few internal packages. And as Jared just wrote there, that in order to do that, we need to move some things into Crossplane runtime or somewhere else in the Crossplane organization. And some of those things depend on the APIs in Crossplane, and Crossplane runtime would have a circular dependency if we did that. So we're going to make the APIs their own module. It is one thing we've talked about. I've talked about this with Nick a little and Philippe, I think, a little bit, is we could publish the APIs out into a separate Git repository as well. Like that's what Kubernetes does with their APIs. I don't have a strong opinion on whether we want to do that or not. I don't think it's necessary, but it might provide some, might aesthetically be a little bit nicer. So something we can talk about later. I'm definitely open to input on that one. But the first step is just to create a separate Go module within the same Git repository, the core Crossplane repository, and move some things around and make it so that the dependencies go one direction. So this means the APIs can no longer depend on internal Crossplane stuff, which logically they shouldn't anyway, although they do today. It will mean that the common APIs from Crossplane runtime move back into APIs since it's its own module now. And then the dependency graph goes one direction. Crossplane depends on Crossplane runtime and APIs. Crossplane runtime depends on APIs. And we don't have any cycles in there, which is nice. Well, not just nice, it's required. Go doesn't let you have cycles. So that's the work that's in progress right now. And then I'm hoping we can move pretty quickly once that's done on introducing some of the project stuff that we've talked about with DevX, and really get moving forward on that. I think that's my CLI update for today.
Awesome. Anything else from the folks heavily involved in SIG CLI, like John and Theo and such? All righty. Well, let's move on then to the demos section, demo and presentation section. So Stephen, I will stop sharing here so that you can take it away and talk about TypeScript for functions.
Great, thanks. Let me share
and we have a 30-minute, a little bit more than 30 minutes. So Theo, you said you needed 15 at least or so, or?
Pretty much 15 minutes, yeah.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, so Stephen, you have both of you 15 and should be good.
Sounds great. My screen, there should be like a Visual Studio.
Yep, I can see it, Stephen.
Okay. What we're going to talk about here is just the whole process of adding TypeScript support to a Crossplane function. I'm actually quite excited about this because Crossplane, I'm a Go person myself, and I haven't really been in the JavaScript ecosystem, but I found that I'm actually enjoying TypeScript quite a bit the more I work with it. And we'll talk about it. I think it's actually a really good infrastructure programming language. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take an example from our AWS network configuration and just apply it, just so we can get that going. Let me see here, watch. And we'll just start creating that in the background, and I'll just start talking about what we're doing here. So we're just going to create, and the VPC is all the way on the bottom. So once it gets created, everything else will start. So what we're doing here is we're creating a VPC that has a number of subnets. So you can see here in the configuration, and this is already written in KCL, right? So I'm just taking something that was existing and I'm just porting it over to TypeScript just to make it equivalent. So in this case, what we have is some top level configuration items, and then we have an array of subnets. So this is obviously going to show that we can, loop through some variables. So you can see here the resources are being created while we talk. So we'll just let that happen, and then we'll start walking in we'll talk about the logic of the function, how it's packaged, and then I'll talk about the SDK and the models that I'm using to generate it. So this will be about another minute or so before it gets done. So the entry point for our function, it's very similar to like the Go, and we have two. We have a main.ts and we have a function.ts. So I am going to start at the function ts. So this is the file here. And you can see we have two things going on here. The first is that we're importing from Crossplane.org function SDK TypeScript. So we'll talk about this next, but we have a TypeScript that you can import into any function, an SDK. And you can see here, We have similar things to our other SDKs. We have run function request response, set desired composite resources. Then the next thing we're importing is from Crossplane models, right? So we are generating TypeScript models from the CRDs and the Crossplane providers, and we can import them here. So you can see here in this case, we're just all the main things we're gonna import. So that's kind of the start of it. So let's walk through the logic itself. If you've ever kind of written a Crossplane function, this should be somewhat familiar. We implement a function, and it takes a run function request and a logger, and it promises a return of a run function response, right? So that's what this function is going to do. It's wired in like every other Crossplane function. So we walk through it. We get our observed composite and our desired composite first, and then we get the composed resources, right? So these are all built into the SDK. They have functions, and they just pull out the request. Something you can see here too, that is, if you're not familiar with TypeScript, you can see here, you can check if something exists, right? Like you can see the variable, like whether it's defined or not. And you can see, so what we're going to do here is we're going to start getting from the observed composite, we're going to start getting, does it have a namespace? Or does it have parameter set? And we could check here on that. So one thing I want to talk about here is the first thing is that's kind of interesting about TypeScript is that it has a spread operator here. So what we're going to do is, let's say we want to apply metadata, a common metadata to every single resource. We could define it here, and then we could do these checks, like if the resources exist, just merge it in. And then we have like common labels here, right? So this will be added to every single resource. The same thing with spec fields. You can see here, we're checking, does the user apply management policies? If not, set them to star, right? Same thing with the provider config. So this is actually kind of nice because if you use KCL, it has some similar things to it. These are some shortcuts that make repetitive programming a little cleaner instead of constantly having to nest if conditions. So these are some things in TypeScript. So now let's talk about a resource here. If you remember, we are using models here. So I'm creating a VPC. And what I do is I merge that common metadata that I made before, so we could set the labels on every resource. And the same thing for the spec, right? Any common things we want to have in the spec, we can merge here across all the resources. And then we just start setting things. So this is pretty clear. One nice thing here is because everything is typed, if I try to put in, a bad field, we should get a typing error, right? It's going to say that this is not a known property of the field, so we can't use it. So we have a good developer experience. And if you look here, if you just hover over the provider, you can see all the fields that are available. Okay, so we have created the VPC object from a TypeScript type. The next thing we do is we just run a validate. This is built in. And then finally, we just add it to the a JSON JSON version of it to the desired composed map. And that's the process for adding a resource. So it's fairly clean once you get it up to speed. And if you're a function writer, all you have to do is update the function.ts, right? There's nothing else that you just have to update this one section here for your resources. So now we're going to do the same thing with the internet gateway and add that to desired composed. The next thing is we talked about, if you remember the network configuration, we had a multiple subnets. So we're going to loop through these and set each one of those. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to set the subnet name because we want to make it unique. And then we just loop through them. And one nice feature here about TypeScript is this is kind of, these operators, the ternary operators, like we could say very in a concise way, whether to set the label, whether it's private or not. So, okay. That's pretty much most of the logic here. We do some things about updating the status, but otherwise it's very similar to almost every other composition function. And you can see here there's some shortcuts. If any private subnets are defined, then update the status. More spread operators. And then we just set the desired status, we set the desired composed status, and return the function. So that is a quick tour of a Crossplane function implemented in TypeScript. And as you can see here, we've already got it running down below, so it's provisioned all the resources, and we're true and available. So it actually works, which is very important for a demo. Was there a question there?
Yeah, how did you generate the model?
I will talk about that in a bit.
Okay, cool.
I'm gonna try to walk through each step, just so you know. But yes, we take it from the CRDs. So all the 1600 or 1800 CRD files we generate the models from. If we look at the cluster, the way I'm packaging this one is I have a configuration that includes the function as a dependency, right? So I build the function as a node, like a runnable node module, Docker container, and then I pull it in. So you can see it's here. It's here, right? So I have the configuration AWS network package, and then I pull in the function with it. And this is, just a typical Crossplane function. Going back to that Docker file, so how the function is packaged, we have a Docker file that runs. It's 2 steps. The first build step uses Node, and it just does a build, so it just runs TSC, which is a TypeScript compiler. I've also tried TypeScript is building a new Go compiler. It compiles fine with both of them, so it runs really well. Then we take the function once it's built, and we run it in a distroless container. And we take this and package this up as a Docker image. So it's possible we could run this inline too, like function Go templating, but it seems a little, it's a tiny bit more work to package it as a standalone container, but I think it's better for the dev experience. Okay. The other main thing that's in this function, we have some build scripts and some other things. It's a main.ts. So this is the function that, when you run Node, that it runs. And you can see here, this is where we have the gRPC, and we're using the SDK here that implements the runtime for this, right? So you can see function to start the server, the function runner, and server options. So you can see these are the command line options, which are pretty much similar to every other Crossplane function, whether it's running insecure TLS certs, these things are set by the runtime. And then it just starts up, implements the function, creates a server, and then basically watches for like a control C that shuts it down. So again, if you've used Python or Go, this is a fairly similar structure. Okay. And I have a pretty comprehensive README about doing the read. What we could do now for local development is we could run this locally, right? Because it's just a node, right? So we could do npm build, and it's going to let me do run. Right, it's where am I at? Let's see here. So we have a number of things that we could run in npm, and you can see here we do the X package build push, and we got to do and you can see here it's tsgo. So we're just going to compile it. All right, so now we've compiled it, and now we could run this. So if I do npm run local, let's see here, what is it? We can just run local here, and it's going to run the node process locally. Right, so now you can see here, this is a function, and then what we could do in another window is we could run npm run local render, and this will run Crossplane render. And it renders, right? So we could do our local development workflows here using Crossplane. So there's a lot of npm type scripts that we have located in here. You could see for like building the configuration package, pushing it, building the Docker, and doing all those other things. So that is the core of the Crossplane function itself, just implemented. Before I get on to the next parts, does anybody have any questions about this Crossplane function itself? All right. So Marcus, you were asking about the models, right?
Yep.
So we have a repo TypeScript models, and these are all pushed to. Let me see if I actually can go to the web page, the GitHub repo for this. So I am building upon other work. There's a TypeScript project that was Kubernetes models. That's kind of a mono repo, and I didn't want to, because Crossplane is a little unique in how it has thousands and thousands of CRDs. I thought it'd be better probably to have something separate. So we're very similar to that repo, but we've made a lot of changes just for the ability. So this will generate Crossplane TypeScript models. And right now I have ones for the core Crossplane provider Upjet Azure AD, because that was kind of small. There's only about 20 CRDs for that one. And then provider Upjet AWS, which has several thousand CRDs. And I've generated these. And if you go to NPM, you could actually kind of see there's a documentation link. These are being published to NPM under the Crossplane Models org. I own both these orgs, but obviously as we move these into the Crossplane org, they'll be owned by Crossplane. Yeah, and you could see there's going to be a page plus examples for every single one. So we also have it for Crossplane itself. And the nice thing about the Crossplane models is you could do things like configure cron operations, watch operations, anything you want, anything within Crossplane you could configure, right? Even things we may not should probably not be configured, like a composition revision. So, but yeah, so these can all be created here.
Yeah,
the
that's
way
great.
they get
Thank you.
created, yeah, and the way they get created is we have a models directory here. And for each model, and I'll go to Crossplane contrib. Let's go to Upjet Azure AD. It's in the package.json. And what we do is we have obviously the information about the project itself and versioning, and some scripts, what to do to generate and publish the scripts. But the main thing is down here, right? Under CRD generate, we have a list of all the CRDs. And in this case, because there's not too many, we're pointing right to GitHub, right? So in order to add a new, you just add a new directory, and there's a little script that I have that can do this. You add a new directory, provide a list of the CRDs and the version, and it'll just generate them. Now, in the case of one thing that's different is because some of our providers are enormous, like AWS, right? It's got thousands. So I actually have a script that does and this is what's different. We actually do a shallow clone of just the CRDs directory for this provider and put it to a local cache and then generate it from there. And then you could see here, we're pulling from the cache here and we're pulling all the CRDs. So there's, how many, a couple thousand, since now we have namespace and non-namespace versions. Yeah, so this repo, it's a mono repo right now. I may break it up as it goes, but this is like a way to generate CRD models for basically any provider. And it's fairly easy to add a new provider. So once I get the machinery completely up and running, I think we'll be able to add almost all the main providers very quickly. All right.
Yeah, very cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, it's good. I actually, one of the nice things about TypeScript is there's a lot of, it's got a very large ecosystem. So there's already some good work about converting CRDs into models. The one thing that is a gap here is something we have in the Upbound tooling that's coming to the CLI. It's like when you create an XRD, it would be nice to be able to have that, generate that really quickly, that model for you. So I've got to think about how we want to do that. All right. The last part about it is the SDK. That was the first thing. So this is the way Crossplane works is there's usually an SDK that comes with everything. There's a project template. Both of those are usually hosted in the Crossplane org. So I do have a project template too, but it needs a tiny bit more cleanup. So what we want to talk about here is for the function SDK is if you've ever worked on an SDK before in Crossplane, you'll see things like protobuf request response in the runtime, right? So the runtime takes care of setting up the function. And luckily, if you are a platform engineer, you don't need to know any of this, right? Like this is all the wiring that's done for you. So if you're a platform engineer, the only thing you really need to do is write that function.ts file. Everything else is held, by the project maintainers and all this. So nobody who's actually writing infrastructure needs to know any of this. But since we're in the community here, you could see that the runtime library sets up things like the TLS server options and then creates the servers itself, right? So I had a lot of struggles getting gRPC to run correctly in TypeScript. The ecosystem there is a little less mature. I've tried a lot of things in the past. I tried using Deno, but it has some bugs that block it. But I finally was able to get the right set of options so that it all worked throughout the system, and that's what we have here. So, and similar to the other providers,
and Stephen, just a quick time check. Sorry for interrupting you, Stephen. Just a quick time check. There's we'll leave time for Theo as well.
Okay, well, I could finish up right here then, because this is basically there's instructions on how to do it, and yeah, that's basically it. You could either do typed or untyped. There's Kubernetes types too, so any Kubernetes resource, there's already Kubernetes models in TypeScript available, so you can manage any typed resource in Kubernetes right now using this. And I will stop there.
This is awesome, Stephen. This is fantastic. I really like the ability here to, add like another basically high-level language to do, the nitty-gritty of functions. And you'll be able to pretty much do anything there and have like model support and stuff. I think that's a really awesome option that I can imagine there being some uptake from and traction in the community. So kudos, Stephen. This is fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions
your
for
question?
folks? Sorry. Perfect. Go ahead, Stephen.
No, I was going to say we use PNPM for the model generation. So since it's like a model repo to do it in parallel, but I'll leave it.
Awesome. Okay, Theo, do you want to go ahead and take it away as well? Close us out here for the rest of the meeting.
Now you hear me.
Yes.
You see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Apologies for my voice, first of all. I might be coughing. I'm fighting with a flu. So, I'm Theo. I work for Elastic. I created a testing framework for Crossplane. It's on top of the Crossplane render, Crossplane validate. Now, the reason is we use Crossplane. We want to test it. We have already various methods of testing, and I found a gap. The gap could be solved with render and validate. They are great tools. You can check if your composition is working properly. The problem is that there are limitations. For example, the render command tells you that there are 5 resources created, but how do you know that you were actually expecting 5 resources in that reconciliation loop? Or that the content of those resources is actually the expected one. So I created a testing framework to wrap it up. In order to see the gap, I created this graph. There are ways to do unit testing. Basically, that's the test that you have for your functions. There are tools out there for acceptance or end-to-end testing, where there are Kubernetes clusters set up locally and they create real resources in cloud providers. The integration testing part is the gap that I found that I wanted to solve. The testing framework in a high level, it works in those steps. There is a setup step where it executes some preliminary tasks, like for example, taking the inputs and putting them into a temporary directory so that we can patch them later without touching the original files, or other setup for the testing. The patching part that it's optional, to run render and validate commands, then to do assertions with a custom assertion framework that I developed. And at the end, to do any post-test function tasks or to export artifacts so that you can use them into the next test case. And this is very important because then we can have a combination of cross-plane render runs and chained tests, which means that we have better emulation of the reconciliation loop. I have here a graph to explain how it works as an algorithm, all the steps, what is optional and what not. Anyway, I will go straight to the demo. So this is how the YAML file looks like. It has by default, the mandatory are those three inputs: the XR, the composition, and the functions. The XR is here. There is a composition that I wrote that creates a security group, a database, but only if the security group exists, and an EC2 instance only if the XR has RDS ID in the status, which means that the database needs to be created, and the functions. So the important thing that I want to show you is that before starting that it supports also claims. In order to support claims, I wrote a converter tool, which is very similar to the converter tools that you find right now in the CLI for converting one deprecated usually format to another. I did it also for converting a claim to an XR, pretty much how Crossplane would do it internally. And this tool can be used as a standalone as well. But anyway, Xprin uses it internally. And now I will run the first one. The output looks like this. It looks like in Go test or with verbose, also like in Go test. And there is an extra flag that we can pass, the show render, that shows kind of how beta trace shows us the rendered or composed resources. There is a flag also for showing the output of the validate command. Here we don't see anything, and the reason is, if we check the debug output, that the validate command was skipped because no CRDs were specified. So in the next example, we are passing CRDs, and here we have two tests. The second is like the second reconciliation loop, and in order to emulate that, we just pass some observed resources. We see that the tests run in the same order that they are in the array of the YAML file. And we see also the output of the validation here, which is identical to what we see from Crossplane beta validate. By the way, feel free to interrupt me at any point. The next example is the same as before, the same functionality. The difference is that I want to introduce this common block here, where to avoid some duplication on the inputs between the tests, we can define them in this common block, and they would be applying to all the to all the test cases. If it is defined also in a test case, then the test case gets priority. So if we define here functions and it is different than this one, then what we have in the test case takes priority. I'm not going to run it, it's the same output. Now patching. For patching, the only thing that is supported right now, I took the XRD flag that is in the Crossplane render command in version 2, and I exported it to a standalone tool. This tool, so it has the XRD flag, and the reason is that this way we can use it also for Crossplane version 1. And I will make a pause here to mention that the Xprin can work in both Crossplane version 1 and version 2 right now. The reason is that it runs Crossplane as a binary. And in order to do that, it checks where Crossplane is in your path, and it uses that one. And if you define a global config file, you can also override the default render command and the default validate command. So if validate becomes graduates from beta validate to just validate one day, you can have both backward and forward compatibility for Crossplane versions. And right now I've tested in both version 1 and version 2. It works in any version right now. In the future for this patch XR tool, I want to introduce more things, like to be able to add or remove fields and other things. Anyway, right now this is the only thing supported, and it's pretty much the same functionality. We can see it in this example that we have defined an XRD that has required team, and the team has default value. And then we use this XR that doesn't have the spec team defined. So if we run it, the first one fails the validation because the spec team is not defined, and the second one, because it is patched, it is fine. And as I mentioned before, the patching does not happen in our original files. It happens in temporary files that are copied in a temporary directory. So we increase the coverage without actually changing our original files. Then I introduced hooks. Hooks are just shell scripts. There are two types of hooks, pre-test and post-test hooks. The reason is that I wanted a quick way to be able to do advanced things that I didn't have time to code pretty much. So if you want to do some advanced patching or whatever, something that a shell command or an external tool can provide you, this is the way to do it. The hooks also support template variables. So in this example, the pretest hooks are going to show us the path of the temporary directory that holds the XR after the patching is done. Same for the composition. Or we can do advanced patching with YQ directly here. I'm going to run this example. We need the extra flag show hooks to see the output of the hooks. So in this one, we see the outputs that we are expecting, and also we see that it creates also the EC2 instance because we have patched the original XR to include the status RDS, like the composition is expecting. And then for the chained tests, so we have, again, with template variables, we have the ability to take artifacts from one test and use them as inputs to another test. They have to be in order though. So this test we run first and this we run second. So we export the artifacts from this one. And the way that we export the artifacts is by introducing this ID, which is similar to how GitHub Actions is doing it actually. And then we can reference it in a follow-up test. I'm not going to run it, but you get the idea. Or in a more complex example, we have, let's say, an infrastructure that creates an XR for another composition. Then we can create it and also render it in the same test as the output of the artifact of the previous test. So to run this so you can understand it better. So this one creates this X-base infrastructure XR, but it also creates X AWS infrastructure. And I want to make sure that this one renders fine. So in the next test, I took it from this one. And I was able to render it again and see that, yes, okay, it validated. And the last thing that I want to show you, we are running out of time, assertions. I introduced a few types of asserting the results. Count for the number of resources, if an exists and not exists for resource, field exists or field not exists for specific fields inside the resource, and then field type, where we check if they are string, number, or array, or whatever, or field value to check if they match the value that we are giving them. It's quite limited for now, but I plan to extend it with more things. And also I plan to extend it to be able to have more engines in the background. So if somebody is familiar with Chainsaw, for example, to be able to easily tie it to Chainsaw. Okay, that's it pretty much. All the examples from this demo are inside the Git repository, so you can run them yourself under the examples repository directory. And there is also the Docker directory with extensive documentation. Any questions?
Yeah, Theo, I really like the test chaining as well, because that kind of like fills the gap that a lot of people feel for, just if you're just using like Crossplane render directly, let's say, you can kind of run it, but it's a single reconciliation, right? So having that like be able to run it and then kind of pass these outputs to the next one to kind of simulate that second reconciliation loop is really, really cool, I think. So that's one of the things I like the most about this framework and experience you've enabled here.
Yes, and this is by design actually. Like people asked for the crossplane render to be able to support this, but it is clear that it is the desired way is to actually emulate only a single reconciliation loop. So yeah, this bridges the gap.
Exactly.
More questions?
I had one more, Theo. Could you show the patches again real quick? Because I think I missed what those look like. Could you just show like kind of an example of what those patches look like?
So the patches are from a separate tool, this patch XR tool, which right now it just adds connection secrets manually because in V1 at least there was no way to do it with observed resources. If you remember, there was an open PR. We decided not to merge it for V1. So I needed a quick solution in my case because otherwise Crossplane render doesn't work. So the quick solution was to actually be able to add it kind of manually. So you add right connection to secret ref manually in your output. And being able to also to manipulate it by defining the name and the namespace. So it's kind of like providing an observed resource, but it's a hacky way to do it. And the XRD functionality that is the identical what you get right now in the Crossplane V2 in Crossplane render minus XRD. So this makes it available also for V1 users. And honestly, I thought of moving it away also inside the Crossplane CLI to move it to a separate tool and outside of the Crossplane render so that people can use it for previous versions as well. And in the future, I want to add more functionality, like to be able to add or delete a field in a resource, for example, for advanced patching, for advanced coverage.
Cool. Well, we're out of time here, but thanks, special thanks to Theo and to Stephen for showing off the quite awesome stuff that you guys are building. And thanks here for the 6CLI folks for all the effort that's continuing to go there and kind of building like a better overall unified developer experience for everyone that just makes Crossplane easier to use for everybody. Definitely appreciate all that work also. So yeah, the next time we meet, we'll be right around the 2.2 release. And if anybody needs anything in the meantime, just reach out. Feel free. And good to see everybody today. Bye.